Well, good morning, Anthem family. It's so good to see you all here today. Why don't you go ahead and have a seat? My name is David. I have the pleasure of serving on the team here, and I just want to welcome you to church today, whether it's your first time, whether you've been here 100 times, whether you've been here however many hundreds of times we've had Anthem going for the past few years. I'm just so glad that you are here. Our big invitation this year is that you would consider making Anthem your church home. If you've been looking for a place, would you consider making this your place to be each week to be able to give back as well? If it's your first time here, though, we want to extend a special welcome to you. In fact, we have a gift for you. We would love to get to know you. Just text the word Anthem to 55498 right there on the screen, 55498. Select the first-time guest option. We'll get your info, and then come meet us at the Growing Disciples Center in the back after the service, because we would like to give you a free gift. But if this is your church home, we want to encourage you to worship through giving, and we're going to go ahead and move into an offering time now. A couple of ways to give. You can give cash, or you can text the word Anthem to 55498. If you haven't figured out, that's kind of your ticket to everything getting involved here at Anthem is Anthem at 55498. That's why I keep saying it. But a whole bunch of different things you can do there, including give. Just it'll walk you through the steps there as you go through that. A couple of things that we have going on here. We have a great young adult ministry called Praxis, and one of the things that they do every summer is a thing called 12 Weeks of Summer, where every week they have a fun event of some sort. As you can see, last week they went to the beach, but this week is a very special week because it involves one of my favorite Adventist traditions of haystacks. Can I hear it? Thank you. I heard an amen. There we go. It is probably one of my favorite Adventist traditions. Anyway, if you haven't, it's so great. It's, well, I won't go into it. I won't spoil the surprise if you're not sure what it is. Anyway, after church today, there is a Praxis young adult potluck of haystacks right here in the fellowship hall. If you're a young adult, we'd love to have you join us for that. But you can also stay up to date with all the other things that are coming up for Praxis 12 Weeks of Summer on the screen here by going to the Praxis Instagram and clicking the link there in their bio. Next thing I want to invite you to do is, going along with the theme of making this your church home, would you consider getting involved in order to give back to your community? So we have a whole bunch of different ways that you can get involved, from our music team that you see here each and every week, to our tech team in the back helping with lights, helping with the video, helping with the live stream we're working on towards getting set up. We'd love to have you involved with that. Our hospitality team that greets people as they're walking in the door, the people helping with coffee. There's so many places we can have you get involved, and you can make a huge difference. It takes a lot of people to put this on each week, and we would love to have you be a part of that. Next, we're going to be transitioning into our time of message with Pastor Chris Stanley today. He's going to be continuing on a sermon series called 6 Steps to a Better You. So let's go ahead and enter into a posture of being able to receive the word today through Pastor Chris.
I grew up skiing in Australia. We don't have powder. It's groomed runs only. My younger brother came over. There was a storm dumping at Mammoth. He said, "Let's go." We did. First day, to the top of the lift. Headed off down the groomed run, feeling confident, feeling excited. On the side, there was a bank of powder about waist height. I'd seen the videos on Instagram. I was going to cruise through there. I knew what was going to happen. Skiing in the front of my boot, as you meant to. Nobody had told me that you meant to keep your tips up when you hit the powder. The change in momentum was actually really quite shocking. My skis went down, disconnected. I went head first. Buried. Just surprisingly stuck. You're in this position, you're like, I don't know what to do next. Like, I'm completely encased in powder. I wasn't so deep that I couldn't hear my brother laughing at me, but I was just stuck. Have you ever felt stuck in your life? Have you ever felt yourself in this position where you've encountered an obstacle and it's immovable? Have you ever found yourself in a position in life where you're sitting there saying, listen, I don't know what to do next. I don't think there is anything I can do next. I just feel stuck. And perhaps it's a marriage. You made the decisions that you made at the age that you were with the information that you had. But now it's become clear that it's never going to be a great relationship. And it just feels like it's never going to change. It feels permanent. Every evening you come home and you don't know which version of the 7 dwarfs you're going to get from your husband, whether it's dopey or grumpy or happy. But you're stuck. What do you do? Or perhaps there's been a diagnosis in your life. You went through the process and eventually you sat there with a doctor and the doctor said it's permanent. It's lifelong. You are going to have to live with this. What do you do when there's nothing you can do? Or perhaps it's an addiction. I mean, it might be 15 years sober, but every morning you have to wake up and fight that demon that is still within you, and it feels like it's not going anywhere. Or maybe you're losing the battle daily and you ask yourself, what am I going to do with this obstacle in my life that feels immovable? Maybe it's a part of your personality. The anxiety will not go away. You've been through the treatment. It's just there. It's a relationship. It's your job. What do you do? Usually what happens in those situations is you start comparing yourself to somebody else who's got what you want. I want their health. I want their income. And then with that comparison, you go to Jesus because you can blame Jesus for this. And you go there with those angry prayers. You know those good angry prayers where you're so angry that you tell God that he doesn't exist, but you still need God to be there so you can have someone to be angry at? Because we're really smart like that. And you begin to wonder, does God actually care about me? Because it's not going anywhere. You start your prayer again while you're driving to work and you're like, wait, shouldn't pray that prayer again. I've prayed it a few times and nothing has happened. Maybe Jesus just doesn't care. It's tempting to come to those conclusions, but I only ask you this question. What if that isn't true? What if in your life you encounter obstacles? What if there are things in your life that, whilst you're in that situation, God still does deeply care for you? The Apostle Paul, a great man of faith, a man who had more faith than all of us in this room combined. A man who had seen miracles done, who had been a part of miracles. Paul the Apostle, he writes this in 1 Corinthians 12. He says, listen, therefore I was given a thorn in my flesh. There was this torment that was sent to me. It felt like it hurt like hell. It felt like it came from the devil. And I prayed to God 3 times for it to be removed. 3 times I went to God. I know what prayer does. I know how prayer works. But 3 times I went to God. And it didn't go anywhere. I am now living with something that is permanent, humiliating, and debilitating. We don't actually know exactly what it was. Some people say it was his eyesight. To the Galatians, he says, see how I'm writing in really big letters? He couldn't see properly. Other people think it might have been the effects of being beaten nearly to death many times. Perhaps there was a form of epilepsy going on, and in those days when they didn't have the technical medical language for it, it was perceived in other ways. Perhaps he couldn't communicate well. He is called a seed picker, a babbler. His elocution, it wasn't accurate. Luther and Calvin weren't so kind. They said, listen, Paul was struggling with a moral and a spiritual issue. Because in the chapter just before, he writes, am I not one who is still weak? Do I not inwardly burn? Perhaps it was his opponents. We don't know exactly what it was. But we do know that God left it there in his life. And so I don't know what you're facing, whether it's spiritual or moral or relational or physical. I don't know what you're facing. But there is a chance that where you are right now does not mean that God does not care for you. Paul prays 3 times, I would like this gone, I do not like this. Instead, God comes back and says, Paul, my grace is sufficient for you. My power is made perfect in weakness. Here's the thing, Paul. You learnt under the instruction of the Rabbi Gamaliel. You learnt from the greatest rabbi available, but Paul, there is still yet a lesson that you have not graduated from. And Paul, the message to you is this: it is okay to need grace in your life. Paul, it is okay to admit that you are weak. Why is that so important? Have you ever noticed how the self-righteous, proud and arrogant people in this world are often the meanest to others? Have you noticed those who think that they've got it all together are really good at judging other people? But have you noticed how the meek, the humble, the lowly of heart, the beaten, the bruised, the broken are kind to others in those circumstances? Have you seen that? Paul, I need you to learn that you are an individual who needs grace and an individual who is happy to admit their weaknesses, because I need you to learn to be kind to other people who also need grace and who also live with weaknesses. Paul, I need this in your life. It's not going anywhere. Tom Radulius, he's an individual, grew up in a family. They didn't have faith, but they were well connected. He's well loved. Him and his twin brother went off to Yale for his initial degree. Well, when they went to Yale, there, coming from a place with no faith, there in the dorms, he encountered somebody who was a Christian. And it was his twin brother who first realized that there might be something more compelling to the claims of Christianity than they had initially thought. And so they went through the process of investigating these claims of Christianity. He continued on to his PhD in physics and there through Harvard. As they investigated the claims of Christianity, they began attending church. But Tom, not only was he pursuing a degree in investigating Christianity, he also wanted to be a part of the CIA, which I think is just wonderful. I think that's fantastic. Listen, in full confession, church, I would love to be a part of the CIA, okay? I would. And so if you'd forgive me just a moment, I know they're watching. Listen, I want in, okay? I just want in. Send the black SUV to my address, because you know where I live. I'll be there with my bags packed tomorrow morning, and we'll get this done. I would love to be a spy, I would. I'll need to keep my cover ID, so I'll continue working here as a pastor, and you'll never know whether I'm a spy or not, but listen, I want in. Tom wanted in. He went through the application process, and I find the next quote hilarious. He says, listen, the day of my first polygraph is the day I came to faith. As part of your application process to the CIA, you go through a lie detector test. And he realized he wasn't the person he thought he was. He wasn't a bad person, but he came to the realization that he stole fruit from the cafeteria, and that he downloaded music, and that he told lies. And it's fascinating to hear him recount his experience of this, because before he had heard the claims of Christianity, but now he realized that he needed Christianity. And he goes on to say, listen, I realized it wasn't just the drug dealers and the murderers and the corrupt politicians who need forgiveness. I too am in need of grace. And when he realized that, he says he became a kinder person to others around him. I realized I had to treat others with mercy. I needed the grace in my life to make myself kinder to others. Paul, You have a thorn in your side. You have thorns in your side, and they're not going anywhere. And it's not because you haven't prayed, but they are there, and they just might have a purpose. So then Paul goes on. He says, therefore, I will. And I know it's not a big sentence, but I think it says something incredibly powerful. When you find yourself stuck in moments in life, it is so tempting to retreat and to give up. It is. It's so tempting when you face these thorns that are stuck there and are permanent to say, listen, no, I'm not going any further. But Paul says, therefore, I will. What he's doing there is he's saying something very simple. I will do and I will find the next right thing in this circumstance. This pain is permanent, but I will still go on to find the next right thing to do. For all my teenagers in the room, you'll be proud of me. I am basically quoting Kristen Bell from Frozen 2 right there, if you have seen it. The example is this. Dasrath Munji. He was a man working in the fields as a labourer in 1959 in India. His wife was bringing him lunch. His wife brought him lunch, and the field where he was working was flanked by a huge mountain range. As she was walking along the edge of this mountain range, she fell off of the path, suffered injuries, and passed away. He could not get her to the hospital that was over 90 kilometres away because it had to go via the path that leads around this mountain range. So they had the funeral. And then at the end of the funeral, he gets his hand tools, a chisel and a hammer, and he starts hitting at this mountain. People are like, listen, he's taking it out personally on the mountain, as you should, get revenge on the mountain. Next day he goes back and continues to chip away at this mountain. The man spent 22 years carving a pathway through the mountain that was safe so that his village was only 5 kilometers away from the nearest hospital. Show the next photo. He did that with hand by himself. 22 years. There was a thorn in his side. He missed his wife. But he said, therefore I will find the next right thing to do. And he did it. The villagers called him crazy, and he said that only further steeled my resolve. I don't know what you're going through right now, and I know the path might not be clear, but just take the next step towards the right thing to do. And follow that. Do not stop in your pain or your suffering, in your weakness. Take the next step. So Paul does that. And then he goes on and he says something that, listen, let me frankly say, sounds ridiculous. He says this, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults. I delight in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. A strange response, isn't it, church? I delight in these things. Here's the possibility. If you are willing to accept it, there may yet be a strange gift in the thorn that is in your side. Dostoevsky, the brilliant Russian novelist, one of the greatest thinkers in Christian faith. He grew up in a home that was beside a hospital. His father was a great man of charity and worked as a surgeon. Dostoevsky, a genius, though fell in with the wrong crowd of writers. He had a problem with alcohol and gambling, and they stayed with him for the rest of his life. But Russia decided that his friends were dissidents. They were arrested and sentenced to death. He was tied up to be shot. As he was there with his friends, awaiting for the moment when the command would come through, a horseman rode up. and the sentence was repealed. Instead, it was revoked, and it was 4 years of hard labor in Siberia. He nearly passed away in Siberia. We nearly lost one of the greatest minds in history. But when he came back, he started writing. And his novels are dark and sometimes violent, but hugely compassionate and insightful. He writes a novel called The Idiot. Yeah, it's a good name. This is the novel that picks up from his experience at the firing range. This is a summary of it as Alain Dupont writes on it. It says this: Dostoevsky notices the gilded spire of a nearby church and how it glitters in the sun. He had never before realized how entrancing a glint of sunlight could be. And in that moment, he is filled with an immense, deep love of this world. He says, you in that moment might see a beggar and just want to change places with them, just simply so you can continue to breathe the air and feel the wind, merely to exist. He says, in that moment, it seems as a final revelation, something so infinitely precious. He goes on. He says, and then the revised order came, and it wasn't over for him at all. And he asked this question: what would it be like to go through one's whole life in such a state of gratitude and generosity? You wouldn't share any of the normal attitudes. You'd love everyone equally. You'd be enchanted by the simplest things. You'd never feel angry or frightened. You would seem to other people to be some kind of idiot. And hence the title of Dostoevsky's book. There was a strange gift in that moment of torment. Dostoevsky simply says, listen, existence is such a beautiful and a unique thing that simply to exist should be something precious enough for us at all. We live these lives of striving, of fighting, of earning, of failing. And he says, listen, put that all away. And if you can, just in this moment, just cherish existence. Just love the very fact that you're alive. Dostoevsky finds in the firing squad a gift, a strange gift that he couldn't find anywhere else. I don't know what you're going through. But there might be a chance that you might be receiving this as a bizarre gift. You've probably heard this before. It's a strange thing. Somebody has been through a fight with cancer. They've come out the other side. And they say, listen, I wouldn't wish that upon anyone. I wouldn't wish it again. But there was something that I learnt in that I have learnt nowhere else. If you can, the thorn in your side, it might have a strange gift in it. And so Paul, he acts like an idiot. He does. He goes, listen, I am now going to boast in my weaknesses. I'm going to celebrate my hardships. Bring them on. I'm not scared anymore. And I love that attitude. He sounds like a supernatural masochist. It doesn't make sense, but it's faith. See, what I love about Paul is he puts it together like this. He recognizes the fact that in his time and day, in the Roman squares, orators, performers would stand, eloquent, tall. They had the public's opinion. They had the sway over society. And then he comes in. A short, disfigured man, scarred from so many beatings. Stuttering and stammering, not seeing his way clearly, but he is happy to admit that he needs grace. He is happy to admit his weaknesses because he has a message that is more powerful than the gods of the Roman Empire. He has a message that will overthrow this place, and it's not because of his power. Everyone can clearly see that. He is not the messenger that is going to make this happen. It's the message of power that is going to get it done. Let me illustrate it this way. I'm tired of scrolling through Instagram and seeing shirtless fitness models telling me that if I just follow their program, I can have the perfect body like theirs. I'm tired of scrolling through these influencers saying, listen, if you wake up at 4 a.m., read a book by 5 a.m., do 1,000 sit-ups by 6 a.m., you'll make $1 million by 7 a.m. I'm just done with it, okay? I don't want to preach that sort of message. And I don't think as Christians, that's the message that the world needs. The message I want to preach is just simply this. My weakness is nothing compared to God's strength. My God has enough grace sufficient for every one of my failures. I worship a powerful God who is strong when I am weak, who is kind when I fail. That is a message that I can preach, and I'm going to sound like an idiot. But it's the God of my strength. And when I am weak, that is the God I need.